Hey, this is Chris Molyneux, and this is going to be an entire lesson on Master of Puppets from the unbelievable album from Metallica named Master of Puppets. Yeah, we're going through it all. We're going through the whole tune. Every James Hetfield riff, every Kirk Hammett lick, every secondary guitar part, all the harmonies, all the delay stuff, all the two-part guitar harmonies, arpeggios, clean guitar parts, all of it. Everything that makes this song what it is, and it is a piece of iconic, masterful, legendary metal history, rock and roll history. This is a song you need to know. This is a song you need to play with other people, get a drummer, get a bass player, get volume, get gain, get loud, and do this. Learn a tune and make this happen. So let's get into it. Ready, set, go. Before we dig into the riffs, let's talk about the gear for a second. 1985 is when Master of Puppets was recorded, and at the time, James was playing a white Flying V, but it wasn't a Gibson. It was a Jackson King 5 Custom. And actually that white Flying V from back in the early days, Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning, that was actually an Electra Flying V. It looked a lot like a Gibson from far away, but it was not. So amp-wise, he was plugging that King 5 Custom into a Mesa Boogie 2C Plus, the Petrucci amp. But that was slaved and sent into a JCM 800 as the master to utilize its power amp section. So Mesa Boogie 2C Plus preamp section into JCM 800 power amp section. And if you don't know what that means, slaving and mastering, or just slaving, that means that the first amp that you're plugged into, its send out of the effects loop goes into the return of the master. So you get to utilize both amps and create, something altogether different, and that's exactly what James did. Now what I'm doing here throughout the lesson, you'll see me playing, for the most part, my 59 historic Les Paul. That's going to be plugged into a Fractal Audio AXFX 2, but I'll be using actually a Splon Quick Rod model going into an Ultra-Res 412 cabinet. Gibson is definitely a relative thing to James's history with guitars. He started out in an SG, and he's definitely played his fair share of Gibsons, including his infamous white Explorers that he's had. They were not only Gibson, but there's definitely Gibsons in there. You'll see also my 87 Gem 777, my Steve Vai model. I'll use that for Kirk solo because of the need for the whammy bar and just the fact that it's a fun guitar to play that kind of stuff on. And I'll be using a Friedman model. For the clean stuff that James plays, in the breakdown section, I'll switch over to a Bogner Shiva model, and also for his single note stuff, I'll use a PV6505 with a little bit more wetness on there, a little bit more verb on there to kind of approximate what's going on there. So that's some insight into the gear that was used then and exactly what I'm using here. And by the way, take note, these days, Metallica is all about the AXFX. Same thing I'm using here. That's what those guys have out there. So, times have changed. Okay, so let the games begin. Master of Puppets starts with the iconic. I mean, that's all you need to play, and people will know what this song is. Few tunes can be identified so quickly. So that power chord, let's talk about those for a second. I'm going to play a lot of power chords because the tune calls for them, and I will play a lot of two-note power chords. So whenever I say power chord, assume that it's that. If it's something else, I will point it out, such as a three-note power chord where I add my fourth finger, I will point that out. I will also point out if I play a power chord with my first and fourth finger. If I don't say anything and I just say power chord, assume I'm using my first and third finger, which you can also say. Okay, so starting off with that big power chord. That particular one, 7th position E5, is also accompanied by the low E string. And that's going to be followed by a chromatic descent. And I'm going to switch over to the low E string and pretty much sit there for most of this tune. Everything is going to be based off of the 6th string. The opening mutes, the roots of the power chords, and this and that. So we got this. Okay. Your palm mutes are coming in, and that's going to be a huge technique in this tune, as is in every Metallica song. So let's make sure we're clear on that technique. Palm muting is when you place this part of the palm on the string, right on top of the bridge saddle, where the string crosses over. So you got to have it in that, in that spot where you get this. Too far back, you don't get any muting. Too far up or forward, you get muffled, or the string hitting against the pickup. So you don't want that. You want that positioning where you get that big chunk. So after the initial power chord, we have that part of the riff. All the low E's at this point, and actually throughout this part of the riff, and most of them, will be palm muted. So the notes that I'm playing are not. So you have to pivot or you know, jump that palm mute back and forth between making contact and not making contact. So that's going to be a very important technique for you to pay attention to if you don't already have that going on. This is a great tune to get that going. You know, and of course, throughout this tune, when you're approaching all of these riffs, learn them slow. If you're not ready to dive into, actually, if you're able to hit this tempo, you could probably already play this song. So, assuming that you're coming to this stuff for the first time, this tune is at 212 beats per minute, and playing these riffs at that tempo is tough. So take it slow and build the not only the chops but also the strength and the stamina to do it. I mean, to this day, I've been playing this song since it came out, and it still gets me right there. I mean, it's just pulverizing. And speaking about, watch my technique. It's all downstrokes. That has got to happen. You want to get that sound, and you want to get that force, you want to play Metallica riffs and make them sound the way that James does, it's got to be downstrokes. There's few exceptions of when you get to break out of that, and also, you know, if you're not doing it, you just ain't doing it. It's all about the downstrokes. Okay, so first power chord, 7th position E5, low E string to accompany, followed by that final chord that I play, this 8th position C5, is a 3-note power chord. Now, as I said before, palm mutes, they keep popping. You know, the palm mutes are there, and you pop the palm mute technique off of the bridge saddle to get the single notes. So at this point, we're walking down chromatically from the 12th fret E. The first 2 are single notes. The next 3 notes are power chords. This whole intro riff is based on walking down from 12th fret E all the way to the low E, you know, playing all the notes in between, all the half steps that go. So continuing after, you have this. With a little extra, I went into the beginning of the next riff. So let's split it into 3 parts. First part we checked out. Second part, I'm putting my hand in the 5th position and doing this. Oops. What am I doing? I'm simply using that palm muting technique into single notes where I release it. Now, the reason why I want to position my hand like this is because it's reminding me that the notes that I'm playing in this position, I have to play 2 mutes into them. What's going to happen next is I'm going to reposition my hand here to the 1st position and use all 4 of my fingers, and that reminds me that the notes that I'm playing into here, at least the first 2, have 1 mute. And then after that, I do that. So what just happened here? I played a single note low E mute into the 4th fret, into the 3rd fret, and that's how I finished the riff. That is the one time that not only are you muting the low E string, but you're also muting the fretted notes, which at this point is the 2nd and 1st fret notes, the F sharp and the F. Otherwise, all the notes and the chords in the beginning of the riff have no palm mutes. This is the only time you palm mute something other than the low E. So check it out. Here it is slow. Now watch my hand position. And the last note I played was a downbeat into the next riff. That's a little tricky right there. Keep that in mind, that this is the last note. That's the beginning of the riff, which is, you get back in there. There's a couple times in this tune where it's easy to lose track of where you are and not realize that is the beginning of the riff, as opposed to something else that might feel deceptively comfortable. So keep in mind that when you get to here, that riff is done, and that next E is the beginning of you cycling around. So learn it slow. Remember, 212 beats per minute. You kind of got no choice. But learn it slow and get it accurate and build up the speed and build up that stamina. Okay, that riff is played 4 times around, and then it moves into another iconic riff. So let's jump over to that and check it out. Moving along in the intro of Master of Puppets, we come up to another iconic riff. There's two versions of it. Let's take it one piece at a time. So here's the first version. This one is 4 bars long. Now that's going to happen twice. Now what's going on here? It's taking advantage of chromaticism again, but not as obvious as it was before. So this riff is going to work off of this basic idea. That. We have a low E going into a first fret F, and those are always going to be muted. And once again, you're going to have instances or notes that are not going to be muted, so you're going to have to bounce off of that muted, unmuted technique. So great tune to get that technique together. So the E and F are going to precede everything that happens on the 5th string. And I'm going to keep reminding you of this. Metallica's all about, or James Hetfield's rhythm guitar technique is all about the downstrokes. You want to get that sound, you want to get that force, you want to get that phrasing, you want to get that feel, even the tone. It's all about the downstrokes. So notice I played everything with downstrokes. And at 212 beats per minute, man, that's hard. So, be prepared to put some time in and have some patience. Anyway, so we're going with the E and F, and then what we're gonna do is work these 3 notes on the 5th string, and I'm going to use my 2nd, 3rd, and 4th finger to play the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th frets. So in this case, I'm going to go up and then come back down. And that last B, that last 2nd fret A string note, is played twice, and it actually equals things out. That makes 2 complete bars of 8th notes. Now you'll come back around to starting to play it again, but when you get to that point, you're actually going to come back and play F and E. So you're going to reverse that. He does that every single time that he's going to come out of this riff idea. So the very last instance before something happens other than what we're doing here, that framework, he's always going to take, and it's always going to happen here in between the C. So a good way to remember this is this F power chord shape that you see when you do this. Oops. Slow. Without the mute. So in this particular instance, what follows that is this. I'm sliding the G power chord, this 3rd position power chord, down a half step. And I'm following it with an open E mute. The 3rd time I play it, goes no mute follows that. That completes that 4 bars and goes right into playing the riff again. So altogether slow. And it continues through. Now remember, I mentioned this before. This tune, a lot of the riffs, the way they're constructed, it's very easy to lose the 1 or the downbeat or the beginning of a whatever sequence, 2 bar, 4 bar, 8 bar sequence. It's just that's part and parcel with Metallica riffs and James Hetfield riff writing. So it makes it fun. It's a fun challenge. Okay, now everything we just learned here. That riff is going to get played 2 times, and then we're going to go into a section where we play the same riff 2 times, but it's extended. And the way that it's extended is we start out with the first 2 bars, same thing. And remember that double B at the end. Now we're going to play all of that the same. Everything is going to be the same. But now something's going to happen, right? Because I played. As soon as that's played, something happens. So what's happening here is this. So instead of playing 2 Bs, there's just a B power chord that lasts for a quarter note instead of the 2 8th notes that the 2 Bs do. So the first half of this 4 bar section is this. Right? Okay. Keep continuing on. It's going to do the same thing with the first 2 bars, get to the double Bs, and then at the end, basically what it's going to do is take the 2 bar version, the 4 bar version of this that we just learned and play it now. Altogether, the 4 bar sequence is this. I'll play it medium tempo. get back into when we play that twice. So first time we see this riff or hear this riff, this is the 4-bar version with the right at the end. And then the second time it comes in, an 8-bar version, played twice, just like the other one, or the first one. It's that longer version where we first hear at the end before we hear, right? Okay. That basically completes the intro except for one little piece, one more piece. The second time the 8-bar version of this is played, it extends the ending by a bar. So throwing it off, making it actually a 9-bar section. That's another very Metallica thing to do, is just to add 1 bar to something. It happens a couple times throughout Master of Puppets and all through the Metallica catalog. That extra bar is just repeating this. So you play the riff exactly the same. Now here's another example of losing that. You know, you have to be really careful with this because you realize that you're going to do this. Remember, it's slide, low E, slide, low E, slide. But then immediately after that, to repeat this, you go into a slide. So there's 2 slides in a row. So just keep track of that. That is followed by this. A little quicker. And a little pinch harmonica at the end would really, you know, line up with what's on the original recording. But it's just, I'm here in the 7th position, and I'm in the same position as the very first power chord, except I'm not holding a power chord down. I'm actually holding a diminished 5th dyad, and that's the, you know, that's the catchy ugliness, you know, raunchy note up on the top. And that is the intro, and then the vocals come in after that. Before we look at what's going on in the intro riff, another iconic riff, let's back up for a second and check out all of the secondary parts. You're playing this with another guitar player. There's some secondary parts in there that beefs this up even more. So let's take a quick look at that stuff before we go into the verses. Starting right from the beginning of the tune, there's a second guitar beefing things up rhythmically. So to accompany the first E power chord in the 7th position with the low E accompanying it, there's a second guitar doing an open low E just to make it bigger. All the times that you hear there's a second guitar playing the same thing. For the most part, it's 2-note power chords. But the very last time, it's all 3-note power chords. It's your choice whether how exact you want to be, but the basic idea is to back that up for both guitars to come in and play that part of the descending line. Now, as the first riff is being played, what's happening is the beginning of that is supported by a quick low E stab. And then the very end of it, when we're here, at that point, that's beat 4 of the 4th bar of that riff, you have another low E. When you cycle it, it sounds like this. You know, if you listen to the recording, you can hear that. The drums are accenting it, and the second guitar is supporting the accent of the drums and also the bass. You know, everybody's going to, you know, help move along the main riff that everything is focused on. And speaking about the last time that descending chromatic thing is played, that we've talked about, you know, the 5th position and 1st position situation of the second guitar joins in to thicken that up before it gets into the second half of the intro that we've already looked at. Now again, when that starts, you have a low E that again stabs that right at the downbeat. So at the beginning of that riff, you have that low E coming in there and supporting it. And you won't hear the second guitar come in again until those sliding G/F sharp power chords that we've talked about before. That will continue to happen in the 4-bar version of this. In the longer version, the 8-bar version, the second guitar doubles everything that we checked out, including the extra 9th bar of, and the following. So, you want to put a second guitar in there to beef things up. Make sure that the parts are what I just explained. The space that creates, the thickness that creates is great, but it's not too thick. So the space where the second guitar is not playing is important to get the you know, the orchestration correct and get the dynamics or the balance correct and sound great. Trust me, these guys know what they're doing. And there's way cooler stuff coming in as we continue through the tune when it comes to organizing two guitar parts. Just wait. Okay, let's keep going and check out what's going on during the vocals. At this point, this riff comes in. Okay, what is that? That's the verse riff, and that's awesome. Let's take note of something very important. At this point, the tune backs off the tempo a hair. So we started off at 212. We're about at 210 at this point. There's going to be several tempo fluctuations throughout the tune. It's pretty safe to assume that this entire tune was not recorded with a click track throughout, and that's fine. Hey, music doesn't have to be at the same tempo all the time. Actually, that sounds kind of stale. So there's some push and pull here when it comes to tempo. Also, there's even more here in this riff, and we'll talk about that in a second. So this is a 4-bar riff, and it's coming in with some pulverizing low E mute to last the entire first bar and the downbeat of the next bar. Again, you have to really pay attention here not to lose it, to get lost in this. But you got to hit that. You can't subtract it and come in at the downbeat of the second bar with, otherwise it'll be off. So it's 1 full bar plus 1/8 note of low E mutes and all downstrokes. Got to do the downstrokes, and then you come into the sliding power chords, which you have a whole step slide from G to A, a low E mute, you get that B flat power chord to slide down a half step back down to A, 5th fret, and then that's immediately followed by, same technique as this, when it looped. You go from the 2 slides to connect that. This time you're doing it all the time though. And I'm sorry, it's not below the last 2 slides, it goes above. So it's G to A, low E mute, B flat to A, and then immediately into G to A again. So that's followed by you gunning through low E mutes again, full bar, plus 1/8 note into those instances of octave sliding G to A. Not power chords, they're octaves. So I'm just switching my 3rd finger over to the 4th string, and of course my 1st finger is laying over and muting that out so I can, not hear it and just get those 2 notes. Now, that bar of 3/4, again with tempo fluctuation, if you try to count that, and trust me, I thought about this for quite a long time. I've been listening to this tune since the release of this record, and it's always, it's always been a mystery. At this point, what we could do is look at it this way. It's a bar of 3, but it's accelerated. So at this point, that first instance of is like a 250 beats per minute, and then it backs off back to the 210. It's interesting, right? So that is the basic riff, and those are the techniques. Downstrokes, remember that each one of the instances going into chords is preceded by 1 more E. So it's 9 muted E's, not a full bar, not 8 eighth notes, but it's 9 muted E's. If you don't do that 9th E both times before the chords, the whole thing will be thrown off. So that's the verse riff, and that goes on for 4 times. After the first 2 times it's played, vocals come in, you play that riff 4 times. What's going to happen, and this is a usual thing for Hetfield's writing, is it's going to jack up a whole step. He likes to move the same riff a certain place, and he likes to do it a lot going up a whole step. So in order to accommodate that, it's the same feel, it's the same vibe, but in order to accommodate that, not have the open strings and the architecture of doing this in E, there's some things that are changed. So you have this. So like I said, it goes up a whole step, goes up to F sharp. So now all the muting, and it's the same thing. It's that 1 bar plus that 8th note. It's all 2nd fret. I'm using my 1st finger to do it. Notice what follows to get the chords. I'm using a 1 and 4 fingering at this point. You could do a 1 and 3, but I'm using a 1 and 4 fingering to do what needs to be done here. It's the same phrasing, but in order to get to it, it's a little different. So instead of 2 chords sliding, what I'm doing is open 5th and 4th string, which is technically a D5 or an inverted D5 power chord. That is followed by a hammer-on of a B power chord, second position. So this, its version of whole step up is this. So it's not exactly the same chords, but it's the same phrasing. Now in between there is no mute. There's no low F sharp mute, there's no open A mute, there's nothing. It's a rest. But you do go up a half step and slide a power chord down, just like you do right there. That's followed by, to get the phrasing, same thing as, it's this. You do not lift the fourth finger. You only have the open A and hammer on the root of the B power chord. So slow, it's this. That's the whole step above version of, which I jacked that a little bit at the end. So that happens 2 times. 2 times he goes through that. And here comes the James Hetfield extra bar. Following the 2 times of this played in F sharp, it just has 1 bar up, a full bar of a muted B in the second position before we get to the chorus. And that's where we're going next. But before I do that, let's talk a second about modal sounds. Couldn't really do that in the intro because it was straight up chromatic, but now that we're here, we're into something that you should take note of. James Hetfield's chord progressions are basically built out of either Phrygian or Locrian modes. Not totally within the realm of that mode. And what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, the Phrygian and Locrian thing is based off the root movements of the chords. So if you look at it in terms of E, it's all about, does he play a B power chord, Phrygian, or does he play a B flat power chord, making it Locrian? So that's the only difference. Otherwise, you see flat 2s all over the place. In this case, I'm also playing a natural 2. You know, the whole thing is based in F sharp, but you'll see plenty of flat 2s in this tune. But right now, that first riff, that's a Locrian riff because we got that flat 5 chord. And you could say that it jacks up to F sharp Locrian from there. We will see some F naturals in here, some flat 2s. Now what I was saying before about not totally being with it, no chord scale has all power chords in it, technically, on paper. But he doesn't play any tritone chords in this tune. Aside from that, all the chords in here are all root fifths. So they don't exactly go with Phrygian or Locrian. So we're basing this off of the root movements, you know, the roots of the progressions, to assess whether it's a Phrygian-based riff or a Locrian-based riff. Okay? All right, on to the chorus, which actually goes into harmonic minor. So let's see how that happens. Next up is actually the pre-chorus. I know I said chorus before, I misspoke. So what it is this very cool harmonic minor based riff that's this. Now that happens 4 times, and it's followed by a little something that segues into the chorus that we'll get to when we get to that point. As I said, this riff is based in E harmonic minor. Now remember also I said before that when I'm talking about a modal color that gives you the riff, sometimes it's all about the root movement. So if there's a chord, and in this case it's all power chords, maybe sometimes those fifths don't exactly fit into what the harmonic minor scale, in this case, or any scale that I'm talking about, has to offer. For instance, when I play that D sharp power chord, that A sharp is not in harmonic minor, but that fifth is secondary to the overall idea here that this is based in harmonic minor, for the most part. Because actually, the second chord I play is a D. So it's basically in harmonic minor. You're definitely getting that sound. That's the important thing to take with this. And actually, the bigger lesson here is you never have to be locked into anything. It's all about the music, not the geek work. Okay, what am I doing with this pre-chorus riff here? It's starting off with the power chord we started the whole song off with, 7th position E5. I get 2 E mutes, and then play the whole step below and come back. So E5, D5, E5. Then it rolls on with this. I love that. I always loved that. It was one of the coolest things when I first heard this tune. So all that's happening here is a palm muted E attacked to slide up a whole step, and then you're going to roll your first finger to unmute to catch that 9th fret B, and then you're going to mute with, you're going to play this with your second finger on the 10th fret of the 5th string, And that's immediately going to be followed by a grace note slide that's unmuted. So mute, unmute, mute, unmute. Take that one slow, it's a little tricky. And as a matter of fact, this whole riff itself, do not take your eye off the ball on this one. It's a little tricky, it's a little hard. Following that part is B mutes, not low E. So you play the B mute, and then you come up a half step to play C5, back down to B5, play the power chords. Then you're going to come up a half step to mute on the 8th fret. You're going to get C mutes. Now when I play those mutes, I don't take my fingers out of the power chord fingering. Why? You know, I might as well just keep them that way. You don't want to hear that 5th, but there's no reason to dismantle that fingering, because you're going to be going back and forth between the mute and the chord so quickly that you might as well be ready. Especially at this tempo, because it goes by quick. That's the riff. It happens 4 times. The 4th time, instead of finishing this with that second half, starting with the C mute, you'll only play this, and then you'll play this. Oh. It's this descending 3-note idea, and there's 2 of them. There's a second guitar part here that comes in and harmonizes. And by the way, during the verses, because we didn't back up and look at the second guitar parts because it's the same thing. Everything through the verses, both guitars are playing the same thing. And everything throughout this pre-chorus, both guitars are playing the same thing. And they're phrasing the same thing here, but one is playing that while another one plays this. They're both these downstroke 8th note instances that are 3-note sequences. The primary guitar is here in the 4th position with this. There's that D sharp, you know, that harmonic minor indication. The secondary guitar would be here, moving over to the 6th position. Same interval stack as the first 3 in the other part, whole step, half step, descending. And includes that D sharp, and then finishes off with this. So those 2 parts come together, or played at the same time to do this, and both guitars joining in to go, you know, the master stuff. There's your flat 2. There's your first instance of an F power chord there, you know, flat 2. So we're into that Phrygian or Locrian thing, but there's that flat 2 chord, and James loves it, plays it a lot in the tune and throughout Metallica, everything. That's going to bring us to the chorus. So up until this point, we've looked at everything, both guitar parts, and got through the intro, the verses, the pre-chorus, and now moving into the chorus. So let's do it. Time for the chorus. I'm going to play through it. I'm going to count you in because I want you to count with me. Check it out. See if you keep up with it. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. I think I might have flubbed. Came in a little late on that last F. Okay, so what happened here? Power chords, some low E muting for the most part, some single note muting, other notes in between the chords. But the most important thing is it didn't stay in 4/4 the whole time. And you know, we've already seen this this tune do that. But there's some instances of 2/4 in here. So where are they? It starts off with a low E power chord, and the last 3 8th notes are. And it's always that. It's some kind of mute going into the next chords. That's basically that same phrasing. And what it does, when I get to that F sharp chord and play those 3 mutes to follow, that's a bar of 2. So 1 and 2 and. So it goes from 4/4 to 2/4 and gets into that G. That G is held for 2 bars, tied whole notes. That's the basic phrasing. 4/4, 2/4, 4/4, 4/4. And the last 2 bars are whole notes. That's basically what goes on. So that, what I just said, happens here. This time I'm playing on the 5th string, basing everything off of that. So starting with a 3rd position C5, and sometimes I'm playing with 1 and 4s because it just feels comfortable for the type of movements here. So I start off with a C and use open A mute for that same 4-2, 4-4 phrasing, you know, when it comes to the meter. Okay, that's followed by coming up here to D in the 5th position, still on the 5th string. This time the mutes that are going to pop back and forth between the chords are going to be 3rd fret Gs, and they're going to be this. Well, let's do it from here. So I'm using the G to bounce. It's the low E string, 3rd fret. I'm using that to toggle between the C and the B, both rooted on the 5th string. So that gets me through that. But the catch here is that last B is only played for 1 bar of 4. So that's actually a 3-bar sequence, 4-2-4, when it comes to the meter. Because it feels like the E jumps in, you know, a little early, because it does. It's a bar early. That's back to the 4-2-4-4 thing, and back to using the low E to do the mutes, you know, that precede those chords. And then from there we get the, you know, the master, E and F. That's always what's going to be played there when during that part when that word is chopped up into 2 syllables. So following that is one more instance of this phrasing. Back to 4-2-4-4 meter feel, and it's just open E with an F sharp bouncing to a C. Same phrasing, 4-2-4-4. And again, that's the chorus. Now up until this point, these are important parts that we just learned because they're going to be played again throughout the tune 2 more times. So that outside of the intro, once the verses come in and the goes into the pre-chorus and this chorus, that's how everything is played, including the descriptions that I gave you about the second guitar parts and what they're doing. Now, following this first time, what's going to happen is we're going to go back to the 8-bar version of this riff. Oh, the 8-bar version, sorry. And remember, the tricky part is, see how easy it is to lose these things? The tricky part is, remember, anytime an event happens coming out of the riff, you got to reverse the EF thing to FE. So, correctly, and then the second half, so that's actually the 9-bar version of it, sorry, because you have that doubled, and then that will go right into the verse riff, which we have already checked out. So following the chorus is the 9-bar version of the 8-bar version of the 4-bar version when we first learned that awesome chromatic riff here, or chromatically based riff that happens in the 1st position. Okay, so we got through a very important chunk of the tune because these, like I said, these parts repeat themselves. So what's going to happen from here? The song's going to go back to the verse, go through the pre-chorus, go through the chorus, and come all the way back through all the parts we just talked about, ending with the up until the point we just talked about, and then things change. Big time. We go into a whole different theme. Let's see what that is. At this point, Master of Puppets takes a huge 180. All kinds of guitar greatness happens for a while until the vocals come back in. It starts off with this. It's this great clean tone arpeggiated part that basically stays in an E natural minor progression with a little harmonic minor 5-chord thing at the end. Actually, what's really important here is it's a what's called a 1 flat 7 flat 6 progression, which is a metal hallmark. Except in this case, it's voiced in a way that we have these chords in the open position. Also take note, that first bar I'm playing there is a bar of 2-4, followed by 3 bars of 4-4, and ending with a bar of 2-4. So it's 5 bars sandwiched by bars of 2-4 with 4-4, meat in the middle. So what am I playing? I'm starting off with E minor. This is the 1 of that 1 flat 7 flat 6 progression, the natural minor progression. So just starting from the bottom of an E minor, open E minor, and playing up the bottom 4 strings. That's followed by the flat 7, D. So in this bar of 4/4, we have again the bottom part of the chord, except it starts on the 4th string. So I'm doing that. I'll come back and then go to the high E string for a quick half a beat of 16th note triplet. Just a hammer-on pull-up. You know, practice, you're going to probably have to practice your touch with holding a chord like that and getting a legato instance such as this with your 2nd finger while not cutting out any strings. And then from there, I'm going to come back to the 2nd string. So you can think of it, this as these 2 notes, and then I'm going to go, you know, down, up, or, you know, adjacent strings going down, down, except you have that hammer-on pull-up thing there. And to finish that off, this is a little bit of a tricky thing that happens here, but it doesn't have to be tricky. So after the hammer-on pull-off, after the quick, you're going to play this A, and then you're going to put your 4th finger on to grab what actually becomes a D sus4 for a second. But simultaneously, as you play that note, you're going to take your 1st finger off the 3rd string where it's sitting on the 2nd fret, enough that you hear that note. So, like that, to get that octave to ring. Don't make it any more complicated than that. That's what it is. If you try to think of it any other way, it'll feel like you're doing 2 things at once. You are, but you don't want to tell yourself that. So, that's that bar. And before I go any further, generally the way I approach any kind of playing style like this, you know, clean, or it could be dirty too, but an arpeggiated section of chords like this, what I like to do is, whatever direction I'm going in, if I'm ascending, I play downstrokes until I get to the last note in the pattern, because probably the last note in the pattern means I'm going to change the pattern. So I'll do the opposite stroke to get ready for what's coming next. So for instance, from the E minor, I'll go down, 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 up, and then I'll start the D with a down, because the next note in there is ascending or going up to a higher string. So down, down, up, because the next one is a lower string. Down, because the next one is a higher string. And then when I get there, I play an up, because the next one's a lower string. So you see the logic? That's how I like to approach this type of stuff, and I'll continue to do so. Okay, from the D, we go to the flat 6 chord. In this case, it's a C add 9. You're going to play the bass note, and then you're going to go in between the 3rd and 2nd string, like this. Note, the 3rd time I played the open J, I played it with an upstroke because I'm going to a lower adjacent string. And after that, I will lift the 3rd finger from the 2nd string to play an open B. So here it is slow. All the while, I'm holding down everything that I can for as long as I can to get the most ring. Following that, we're going to play, we can look at this as a 4/5 progression. You know, the 4 chord, as brief as it is, and actually I fingered it like this with the 3rd finger on the 2nd fret of the G string. And then you'll come over to here to start outlining. So check it out. From the C add 9, when I do this and I come out of it with that open B, when I go to play the next chord, which is an A sus2, I could finger the whole thing. If you want to do that and you're comfortable, go for it. If that makes you play it more cleanly, go for it. I just fingered this because that's all I need. But I'm not saying I would, I'm against the logic of fingering the whole chord if it feels comfortable. Sometimes I might do that. But in this case, I'm playing just the note that I need, because I like having that finger free to do what needs to happen to start setting up for the eventual B7. And that's the harmonic minor 5 chord that happens there. And that bar finishes off with a semi-staccato G that I play with my 4th finger because all my other fingers are busy holding down the B7. So that comes over and just goes, and and then brings it into the beginning of the progression again. So that's what's happening with the clean tone part. Now, there's your 5 bars. It's going to get played again, and there's going to be some beautiful stuff that comes over it. But before this 2-part guitar harmony comes over it, this clean tone part is played again with some swells that come in. Let's check out what those are. So the clean guitar part comes in. The second time it's played, there's some swells that come in. So it's a 2-guitar part. The primary guitar part does this. So I'm following the meters, the 2, 4, 4, 4, 2 meter with the amount of time that these notes ring out. They ring out for the entire duration of each one of the bars. So for the first bar, and it's following the root of the chord, I'm playing that 7th fret E. For the next bar, for the D, I'm playing the 3rd of the chord, going up a whole step from that E to the 9th fret. Then I'm going to the 5th of the next chord and holding down that G on the 10th fret, and I'm on the 5th string the whole time. Switching over to the 4th string, I go to the 7th fret to play the A that's there. And at this point, I'm going to split that bar in half, so I'm not bringing out the whole duration of every bar, because I'm following the chord progression. In that bar, when we're at that point, the 4th bar, there's the A chord, the A sus2. I'm holding down the root. There's the B7 that comes in, holding down the root, and then this is just a whole step, 7 to 9 on that string. And then for that B7 that happens in the final bar, I'm over here on the 3rd string, 9th fret, to get the 3rd of that chord. And then as the progression finishes and rolls over to, recycling itself and starting over again, you get a resolution. Now, how am I playing this? I'm doing volume swells. So I'm activating the note with a ghost hammer-on, or a hammer-on from nowhere. So I'm just literally coming down on the string with my 3rd finger, because I'm using my 1st finger to lay over the strings to cut out any wanted string noise. And I'm using my 3rd finger because it just has that strength to do it. And as I come down and make contact, it activates the vibration of the string. Right after doing that, I will slowly raise the volume knob up. And I'm playing with my bridge pickup right now. And I'm going into a tone with a delay on there, just a little bit of delay to give it some, just a little bit more depth, a little bit more ambience. I'm not a fan of that word, but that's what's going on right there. On the record, you'll hear a cleaner tone than what I'm using here and stuff. I just felt like dirting it up a bit, which this is a Marshall amp model right now, a JCM 800. So I'm straying away from the sound that I had before for the Hetfield riffs. So that's the primary part. The only difference between that and the secondary part is when you get to the final bar over that over the B7, when the primary guitar goes to D sharp, the secondary guitar dips down to 9th fret F sharp on the A string, and that's playing the 5th of the chord, and you're creating a you're playing 2 chord tones over that chord. The distance between the 2 notes you're hearing is that you hear a 6th, and then the resolution, when the primary guitar goes up to E, the secondary guitar just goes down a whole step to play an E, but an octave lower. Another thing to keep in mind when you're doing these swells, try not to add any vibrato. Just think more, well, I mean, a violin could, or any sort of bowed instrument could, but you're trying to get that type of sound, and with just no vibrato. It's just so tempting to do it. You wanna, but don't. If you're trying to recreate the way it sounds on the recording. Because one byproduct of that is when you start wiggling that note, you're also wiggling the repeats of the delay. So to keep it really, really clean, if you haven't noticed, there's that's one of the hallmarks of Metallica's guitar playing, is very precise and clean and tight. You don't hear any extraneous string noise coming out of James's rhythm playing. You don't hear, what do you call it, that noise a lot of him going with. You don't hear glisses. You don't hear slides from nowheres and stuff like that. He's very, very tidy about how he plays and what he plays. So that stretches over to something even as incidental as this. Okay, so that's the arpeggiated part. which, by the way, I used a little bit of chorus on my tone when I played that. His tone is cleaner on the record, but it was also triple tracked. So that's how he gets the depth, and also a little bit of modulation. So what I tried to do to recreate that with one guitar was get a mono analog delay and a very, very, very slow rate with enough depth to get some depth in the sound to, you know, get what I was going for with a touch of a medium room reverb to get more depth. But that's how I got the tone. And by the way, for him, his choice of amp for clean tone stuff is a Roland JC120, which, you know, is kind of the benchmark for clean tones. Okay, so there's the arpeggiated part. There's the swells that go over it. What comes next is a very cool two-part guitar harmony that outlines the chord changes with arpeggios. Let's go check that out. What happens now is a two-part guitar harmony is played over the clean tone changes after the swells. So I'm going to play the primary part. This is the 5-bar progression. That's going to get played twice, and there's a second part that's a third above that plays the same exact phrasing. So once we get this, it's easy to translate, or it's easier for us to learn the second part. So the arpeggios outline the changes. So the first change is E minor, the first arpeggio is E minor. What's happening here is everything's played on the top two strings, and all the arpeggio shapes are what I would think of as root bass, because the lowest note of the 3-note or 2-string arpeggios I'm playing, the lowest note is the root. So the first pattern is just this. I'm starting with the arpeggio, jumping up to its 5th, and coming down the arpeggio. So 1, 5, flat 3, 1. And don't add any vibrato like I just did. Remember, you know, when James does it, he does it. But he doesn't do it a lot. And when he doesn't, he doesn't. Especially in a two-part guitar harmony, you don't want to muck up things. You want to make sure that both guitar parts are played the same exact way. And a good way to usually keep those clean is don't add any vibrato when they're happening. So anyway, we have the E minor. That's just that. That goes now, and also take note, when I go to the D major arpeggio, I'm going to play, I'm in this position right now. I'm going to play the first note of the next arpeggio with my 4th finger. I'm going to make the transition and position myself in that position as soon as I start. So it could be comfortable. I could have done this. I could roll over, and you could too. You could roll over with your 2nd finger and then, you know, kind of work your way to that position and then continue on with the rest of the lick with, you know, being in a position and having your 4th finger play that note when it does again, which it will. That's up to you. I like to, you know, jump right to the position because it keeps me locked in with what's going on, and it helps me remember what's being played. Kind of like when I was explaining to you, you know, the very first riff in the beginning of the song with the chromatic descent, where I like to play in 2 positions. If you watch James play it, he plays it with 1 finger. It's usually his 2nd finger just goes down. I think Kirk plays it with his 1st finger. So, you know, whatever works for you in this case. So there are some suggestions you can consider. So from E minor, once I get into the D position, I have this pattern that's played for both the D and the C. So I'm starting out with descending the arpeggio, repeating the root, and doing that again. And then I'm going to make that jump with my 4th finger to the top note of the C major arpeggio and play the same exact pattern. Now I'm continuing to descend down this melody, except this time I did play the 3rd finger in that position because of what happens next. So I play that note and play a hammer-on pull-off, and James always has that very almost classical-like phrasing when he plays hammer-on pull-offs. They're very what's a good word? You know, to me, they just come out. They're very astute. So now at this point, definitely making a harmonic minor inflection heard. And we've seen this a bunch of times in the tunes, and this happens a lot with harmonic minor. It's usually something that's inferred. It's usually not something that you're married to. Meaning, a lot of times you toggle between the two, really the thing that makes harmonic minor. What's the difference between that and in the Aeolian mode, the 7th degree? Harmonic minor has a natural 7 or a major 7. Aeolian has a flat 7. At this point, the progression is a 1 flat 6, I mean flat 7, flat 6. That's a natural minor, minor, major, major. That 7 is based on a flat 7, that major chord. This guy. Well, once I get to this point, I start including D sharps, and I'm starting to infer that harmonic minor sound. That's a common way to deal with harmonic minor, because if you stick with that one only, it starts to sound a little too Mingvei. So, at this point, we're into the harmonic minor thing. Now notice my fingering. Like I said, I start with the 3rd finger. I play that hammer on pull up and move my 1st finger down to position myself to play the half step with my 3rd and 2nd. And then I'm going to use my 3rd finger to make that slide, and then finish it off with... Both of the slides are grace note slides, meaning you play the note, but that note that you attack is actually basically not heard. It's just a launching pad for a quick slide to the note that you're going to, and in both instances, they're whole steps. That's the melody. That's the 5-bar melody. 2, 4, 4, 4, 2 with the meters. The same thing, well, there's a secondary part. There's a higher part that's played a 3rd above. So for the E minor arpeggio, there's going to be a G. For the D major arpeggio, there's actually going to be F sharp diminished. And for the C major arpeggio, there's going to be the E minor. And it'll be the same shape as we start out with. The whole thing is the same approach. It starts out with, and stays with, root position arpeggios. All the phrasing is exactly the same. Here's the part. So, like I said, it's the same phrasing. It's just different arpeggios. You're going to start with a high G major arpeggio. You need a guitar with a 22nd fret, at the very least. If you have 24, then you're fine. But you definitely need 22 to play the high G arpeggio. And then, you know, from there going down, you'll be fine. And like I said, it's the same exact phrasing, but you're using a G major arpeggio, to F sharp diminished, to E minor. Now, I have my 2nd finger on the 17th fret, but I'm going to use my 3rd finger to start that same phrasing sequence to get into the melodies that go over the 4 and 5 chords. So I could fold over my 2nd finger. You can do either one. And then once you get from there with the rest of the melody, remember there's those 2 grace note slides. That one feels exactly the same as the same fingering. And then the one on the high E string, it's got a little bit of a different interval sequence than it did before. It starts out the same way, but the last note is a whole step away from the previous note as opposed to a half step. I'm still using the same fingers though. I'm ending it with the 3rd finger. You could do this though. You could end it with the 4th finger. That's a little cumbersome for me to jump over to get that G major arpeggio after that. But that's me. Whatever is comfortable for you. A 4th finger, a 3rd finger on that last one, you'll be good. But that's the 2-part guitar harmony. And it comes in twice. When it comes in the 2nd time, after James's solo, which we're going to check out next, it's the same exact thing. So we know how to play this part. But like I just said, James takes a solo, and what a solo it is, so let's check that out. At this point, James takes a solo, not Kirk. James took solos here and there, still does, and when he does, they're super melodic, like this one. See? Really, really good. So what happens here is James is outlining the changes pretty well. So this is what I would conceptually call a vertical solo, where he's taking each bar kind of as each event and not playing one melodic device over the entire series of changes, say E natural minor or Aeolian, or a pentatonic approach. It's very well played. So what is he doing? He's opening up over the E minor first bar with just this simple idea, and just walking it up. And you can, if you want to visualize an E minor scale right here, that would work. And at this point, he kind of is, if you want to think of it that way from an E minor scale, he kind of is taking one idea and throwing it over the E minor and then the D change that follows, sort of. But he definitely resolves on the C to make it sound vertical. So over the D, he plays this simple idea, which, watch the phrasing. It's just, so the first two notes, they're a little quicker than the rest of the phrase, which is, those are triplets. So you have da 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 da. And then it's finished with what I was talking about before, those, very prominent sounding hammer-on pull-off instances of James Hetfield that he's known for, in my head at least. So, and that's him within that same, fingering here, think E natural minor if you'd like. He's resolving on that C. So nailing that change, making it stand out, coming down on the root of the chord that's there, which is C add 9. And further outlining the chord with that bend is, going up to back and forth between D and E, E being a chord tone of C, third. Okay, moving from there, actually he plays through the progression twice, sorry. Come on now. So it's a 10-bar solo. Over the A sus2 at this point. Just a simple idea there. That kind of is a horizontal idea too, thinking it's another position of an E minor scale. There is a hammer-on pull-off instance, but do not rush it. It's just, it's in time with the rest of the melody, so don't do this. It's tempting, sometimes with those type of legato instances to do that. And at the end of these phrases is all vibrato. This time you can apply vibrato. And also about the tone. I'm sticking with the same sound. I was playing through a PV6505 model for all the single note stuff, but I switched over to the neck pickup to get that thicker woman tone that seems to be what he's using. Okay, from there, walking into that final bar of the first pass through of the progression, he comes in with a hammer-on that sets up a double stop bend, a nice bluesy double stop bend. It comes out of it with some, back and forth of the bend to pull off to that 12th fret G. Get a very bluesy type of back and forth here to finally resolve on that E to start the progression again, that second progression that I failed to recognize before. So coming into the D chord in the next progression, it's a simple melody that starts off with a choked staccato note here and another one right there. So watch that phrasing. If you're trying to nail this phrasing, you have those two instances of staccato, and after that second one there's a final hammer-on pull-off instance that is at that usual timing that he does, half a beat, 16th note triplet, and that slides to nowhere. You still have that pitch sliding down a little bit, but no destination. The destination's on the next adjacent string. Lower adjacent string, 10th fret C. Why? Because he's nailing the change. It's the same resolution that he did the first time he came to C. He nails the root right on the downbeat. And then just gives you a little walk up back to it. And I'm using my second and first finger to do this part right there. And then from there he's going to walk up the E natural minor. So you know what, maybe there's more horizontal stuff going on here than I had previously thought. And seeing this from analyzing, and this is how you should be thinking when you're learning this stuff to get the most you can to take into your own playing. About the phrasing though, it's the same phrasing as this when he did this. It's that two notes which are 16ths, and then from there it goes into triplets as he walks up this melody here. Once he gets to that note right there, which I'm folding over my second finger to do that, then it straightens out to 8th note. So it's pretty cool. He's got three different things that go on in that phrase. He picks it up, it's kind of leading tones with 16ths, walks it up with triplets, and then straightens it out with 8th notes to do this. To go into almost grace note hammer on pull-off. It's quicker than a 16th note triplet. It's just this. I'm sliding up with my third finger to get to that 19th fret high E string B. Practice that one so you can nail the accuracy of that. It's no fun to play this solo well and then, you know, overshoot or undershoot that bend, slide, you know, to get there. So, you know, it might take a little practice to consistently get to that B, and it resolves on that E, and that's the solo. That is a great James Hetfield, perhaps his best solo, most melodic solo. The rare occasion that he does. So that's the solo. Okay, so from there, once that solo is done, the 2-part guitar harmony comes back in. It's played through twice like we did it before. We know how to do that. Following that is when the progression is actually played again in the same manner it was with a clean tone, but it's heavier. You know, we'll just check it out now. You know. So I'm palm muting most of it, but what I'm doing is opening up or even totally releasing the palm mute technique when I'm at the highest notes of each one of the changes. So this is the highest note for the E minor. You know, for the hammer on pull-off instance in the D, I'm definitely making sure that's not muted. And then for the C add 9, yeah, that's pretty much muted. But then when it comes to the A sus2, you hear that B string keep coming, you know, through the A sus2 and the B7. So that gets played. You know, you have that. It's all the same picking downstrokes and upstrokes I talked about before. It's just a matter of now the gain is back in. But not full fire breathing gain, you know. So if you're going with the same sound and you're doing like a volume knob thing, if you're playing the clean tone part, you want to lower your volume knob enough to clean it up if you're not doing some sort of pedal switching or amp switching. But even if you come back to this and you want to play with a dirt sound, which you should, this one I would roll back the volume back down to about a 6 or a 7, so it's not the total big monster thing that you're using for the riffs. It'll make this come out more, you know. It'll sound like it's just cutting through better. So that gets played, and then from there, it gets back. It starts to get back to, you know, the pulverizing nuclear explosion type of attitude that the tune has required prior to this whole interlude section. So let's get back to, you know, the gain. So things are going to start getting loud again. But actually, we can look at what happens underneath the arpeggiated 5-bar progression that now has a little bit of gain supporting it, you know, whereas doing the palm muting technique I just talked about. Underneath that is another guitar part that simply outlines the changes with power chords that follow the root movement. So for the E minor, you got an open power chord. Then for the D, 5th position D, based off the 5th string. C add 9, bring it down the whole step to C5. And then for the A sus2, open A power chord. And for the B7 instance, you got that B power chord that's, you know, in that 4th bar where the changes are split. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then for the B7, you have that D power chord. And that's another instance that I've talked about where the higher note in that D power chord is an A sharp. You know, that doesn't jive with, you know, the harmonic minor instance that is being you know, put forth here with the B7. So what? The power chord is serving its purpose, and fifths in part of chords are very disposable anyway. They're really ancillary tones, and are just there to create that, you know, support sound. Meaning, don't get hung up over that. So that progression is played along with the arpeggiated part now, you know, with a fair amount of gain underneath it. The 2 times it's played, it supports it twice. And you go through that, and underneath, you know, that part is getting ready to join in with the guitar, the primary guitar playing the arpeggiated part, that part coming in, and they all come together to do this. You just got 2 bars of just chugging. You know, low E string, power chord, muted chugging that goes into a new part, so to speak, that is based out of F sharp Phrygian, once again. because we were seeing that in the verses. But it's a totally different type of part where the vocals come back in, and it's just this. So that's that call and response thing in the vocals where it's your master, you know, always the dreams that I've been after. So all I'm doing is just palm muting everything except for the instances where I raise to get that and that. Both that are C sharps. The first time is just single notes where I'm playing a down up. I'm stepping out of the total downstroke thing for a second. And the second time is a C sharp power chord. What's being played before that is just palm muted chugging between F sharp and G power chords based off the 6th string. That's what's going on there. The vocals are in. It plays that, I believe we do that 4 times, right? Yeah, looking at the vocals here. Well, actually, that part itself, before the vocals come in, is played twice. And then the vocals come in, and we play that part, looks like 4 times, 5 times. Yeah, I'm going to go with 5 times. Nope, I'm going to go with 4 times. And then you got that, and that's leading up to Kirk's solo. That's just a G power chord, 3-note power chord, by the way. Down a half step to F sharp, getting ready to go into the E riff, you know, the main verse riff that's, that Kirk's going to solo over. There's another guitar part, though, that is there. That just does that. The only difference is the last bar, where it just plays, you know, single note instances there as the pick scrape is going, and then, like I said, it drops into James playing the main verse riff, you know, which is, you know, we know what that is, and Kirk is soloing over it. So guess what we're doing now? We're going to check out Kirk's solo. Get your whammy bar out. Kirk solo, and a very cool solo at that. Let's check it out piece by piece, starting with this. So what's going on here is over E minor, in E minor, because he's soloing over the verse section. So he's doing all the E minor riffs and soloing over all the F sharp minor riffs. He's starting off with an A minor idea, actually. And it's very reminiscent of something that Satriani would do. It makes sense, former student of. So it's starting off with a pull-off, and I'm using a downstroke to do it. It's a big pull-off. It's a perfect 4th interval, but up here, you know, it's a little closer together makes it possible. So he's doing a pull-off. I'm using a downstroke. And then we're going to pick in between these 2 half steps. And then catch that high E string 12th fret note with an upstroke. So it ends up being down, up, and then you're back into that downstroke. And that'll be a good feel for what needs to happen here at the tempo that it needs to happen. So you'll play this big stretched A minor add 2 idea. And then drop the highest note, the note that you're pulling off from a whole step, coming together to make a C major 7 or A minor 9 idea. The basic thing is you play this pull off 3 times and then play that pull off for the 4th time and do that twice with those half steps in between. I angle my hand over this way so I can get a good pick slant as I'm traveling back and forth between the 2 strings to get that clean. You got to do it in a way that you're not knocking yourself into the 1st string, you know, otherwise you'll have this noise going on in there and it'll sound cluttered and messy. Okay, following that idea, he's going to run into 2 bars of what's called tremolo picking, and that basically means pick single notes as fast as you can for the duration that they're supposed to last, in this case quarter notes, and you have this. So I'm coming in with the 4th finger to start the melody, and that's 19th fret high E string, and I'm just doing this. But with tremolo picking. So just dig in there and get as many as you can in the time span that the note is supposed to last. And like I said, it's quarter notes. That's followed by a whole step bend right here. And what's going to happen is something that requires me to do a fingering that I don't ever do, but it really works for this. What I'm doing is, after I'm playing that bend, I'm coming down to do a pull-off. And I'm going to do actually a double pull-off after the bend that goes whole step, half step. And I'm doing that with third to second to first finger. I never do that. But for this lick, it makes sense, because what you have to do is do that double pull-off, then go here at the same fret you bent, but on the first string, because the bend's on the second string. Grace note slide that up a whole step. Oops. And then double pull off and slide, and then do the same pull-offs on the second string again that you did in the first place after the bend. So slow. Oop. We'll do that again. And I'm just picking those last two notes. So at that point, yeah, I mean, we're still in E minor and stuff. And the point is, I'm using that fingering in order to get the legato requirements that are at this juncture of the solo. There's really no other way to do it. There's unless you bend with your fourth finger, which I personally don't like to do. But this lick, the way I'm structuring it here with my fingering, it's working pretty well. But if you do a fourth finger bend, I guess it would work. You know, you could try either one. You'd have to do the grace note slide with the fourth finger too. So whichever one works for you. The third finger oddly works for me at this point because it puts me in a 3-2-1 situation that I never would do. So what's next? So we go here down to the second position, and he's gonna catch a pinch harmonic, and you're gonna need your bar for this. So you got to get a good, loud, strong pinch harmonic right there, and the bend here is at the fourth fret G string, going up a whole step, and that's the pitch. So you got to get your, you got to position your pick, and where, you know, to get the pinch harmonic. Remember what those are? Is you pick a note, and it's immediately followed by the skin of your thumb. So you got to put it in a position to get that pitch, and once you do, you're going to slam the bar down twice. And then kind of pick it up. So pick it up a whole step above the pitch you'd be at if it were at 0, meaning the bar is not down or up. Then after the rise, you're going to come down and jack it 2 more times, and then kind of give it, you know, something strong on the way down. So again, if we get this consistent, you know, screaming effect here. And again, another Satriani thing. You know, it's not too hard to find influences of a student from a teacher. In some cases, you know, definitely listen to Steve Vai, and it feels like sometimes you're listening to Joe Satriani or Zappa. But back to Kirk, another former student of Joe Satriani. He definitely has his Satriani isms, and we've seen a couple of them already. So following that is a very Kirk-like lick. He's a big-time pentatonic type of player, and it feels like F-sharp pentatonic minor, which he's not officially in yet, but he's going to get there. He's going to get into an F-sharp vibe because he's going to be soloing over F-sharp. But right now, he's giving you sort of a Dorian vibe, which is, I guess that's what he's doing. I mean, it's the only time, besides the end of the song, which we'll talk about later, where you get those sounds. And the reason why I'm saying this is because this bend is going up to a C sharp. We're in E, that's a natural 6. It's the only time anybody's really throwing this flavor together. So anyway, what he's doing is ghost bend. That's a big time Kirk Hammett thing. Ghost bend down to a pull-up. So that's a big part of his phrasing, and that's just followed by you know, to come back. And like I said, it feels very much like F-sharp minor because to me it basically is. So that's a thing to take away from this. It's a cool idea that can happen here to get a Dorian sound over a minor progression or a minor riff. Jack up your soloing idea up a whole step from what it is you're playing over. And there you go. Okay, he follows that with 7th position E natural minor, E Aeolian idea. So I'm just sliding in with my 4th finger to play these whole step, half step, descending 3-note per string patterns. He's going to sit on that B, then start tremolo picking it, almost as if he's like, you know, pedaling a bike down a hill to get ready to really take off, because that's exactly what he's going to do. He's going to play these 3-note per string fingering patterns out of E minor that come up the neck in scale steps. So here I'm playing, for instance, 5, flat 6, and flat 7, like this. Then I'm going to slide up that last note and play these three notes, which is, how did I do it before? I did descending, so I'll keep doing that. Root, flat 7, flat 6, same pattern. Then we're going to go to 2, 1, flat 7, or 9 root, flat 7, same thing. Come up here, another same thing, same approach. This time flat 3, 2, and 1. Notice I've switched the fingering. I've dumped the fourth finger. I could have stayed that way, and you don't want to because we'll find out in a second. I'm doing a 3, 2, 1. So all together after... So he's coming up that single string thing. He plays the E minor, well, they're all E minor, but he plays this idea here in the 12th position. And I believe he only plays that once he gets that idea once. Yeah, he does. He only plays that once, and it gets up to the same pattern up a whole step. Now he's into the F sharp minor riffs, and this is definitely an F sharp minor thing here. In F sharp minor, it's flat 3, 2, and 1. Now what he's going to do here is basically this. Do it for you slow. That's basically what's going on there. So he's playing the half step, whole step thing, and then using his fourth finger to grab that whole step above the highest note I had before in the pattern. And so, you know, and in Kirk fashion here, it's not, he's throwing in, you know, he's going for the energy thing here, and he's just making it happen. So it's not completely, totally consistent with what I'm saying here, but that's the general idea. So after... Once you start doing that, it starts to really sound like what he's got going on here. Now from here, he's going to commit himself to unison bends, which is another big Kirk thing. So he's going to give you... Now what's a unison bend? Well, unison means the same pitch. Two pitches that are exactly the same pitch. So the bend is the same pitch as the fretted note on the higher adjacent string. So he's going to stay on this string set and do this. For a second, he's going to break out of that and do this. Or just, and that's how he's going to break it up. Right? And he's going to take that up a half step. Then he's going to take, half step. Then he's going to take that up a whole step and walk it up chromatically. And let's back up to the first movement that he made after he came out of F sharp. He moved it up a half step and did that for a bar. So he's basically staying with the downbeats in the bar for the entire bar. Then he's going to move up that whole step and walk this up chromatically. And he's at this point he's at the end of the verse section, F sharp minor. Remember, at the end of that there's a bar of 3, 4, and he's taking advantage of that with this. The bar preceding that is 4, 4. So it's, and the timing works out because he's only going to do these 2 beats apiece. He's going to grab that 22nd fret bend after those that chromatic rise of those unison bends starting at the 17th fret or the 17th position. So it comes out to be this. And I grab the bar, big time wide vibrato, back and forth as I dip it. And that's the solo. It's one of Kirk's best, definitely. Great tune, great solo. That's a good combination. So remember, it's over the verse riffs, E minor, F sharp minor riffs and stuff like that. Now, where the tune goes from here is just pulverizing and awesome and one of my favorite sections. Let's get over to it. Coming out of Kirk's solo is probably my favorite part of the whole tune. It has 2 great sections. The first section is this. That gets played twice. It's straight up low E string palm muting and releasing the muting technique to play the F power chords 4 times and then playing the B power chords. The first time, as you heard, was, and the second time was, and it's as simple as that. Just, oops. I'm using 1 and 4 fingering at that point to play that. That section, like I said, gets played twice, and then it goes into a really fun section that breaks out into 2 guitar part harmonies. And also, at that point, that part is double, the one I just played, and so is this one. But it will branch off into 2 part harmony, kinda. It does. It's just not the whole time. You'll see. Let's look at the primary part. So 4 times, almost exclusively, you play this. So that part, low E muting, coming into an open position E minor scale that's 3 note per string sequence there and there, all palm muted. I'm playing my first and second finger to play the same intervals. And on the 4th string, I release the mute to play 4 notes per string with that fingering, 1, 3, 4, to come into a second finger instance where I come down on that C. And then from the C, I gallop, which means 2/16ths into a downbeat. I gallop into, and I could do that alternate picking, I did before. You want to play this as downstroke as possible. You cannot, I've said this before in the tune, you got to always play downstrokes to get the James Hetfield thing. You got to always do the downstrokes on the. And it'd be great if you could do it there too. If you play some alternate picking there, that's not going to be the worst thing in the world, but you definitely got to chug that low E string thing. So that sequence I just played gets played 4 times, but there's 2 catches. First, except for when you start, all the other times that you start the pattern, you're going to gallop into it. So coming out of, you're going to gallop into the ascending open position E minor scale. So you do the gallop every time you come around. So the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th time. Now on the 4th time, this primary part changes just a little bit. Everything is the same. You'll play the open E. Oh, when you gallop, sorry. All that's the same. You'll release the palm mute, and instead of playing, you play. That's the only difference. Oh, and this. And don't finger it like that. You'll need to finger it like this. So instead of playing a C root, you play a C power chord. Instead of ending it with F sharp and G, you play the same fingering on the same frets on the 3rd string. And that starts to open up the harmony idea that's happening here. So that's the primary riff that gets played right there. And what happens after that, that's played 4 times. It does this little call and response thing where it does the gallop. So first time it ends on just an E power chord, and then it does it again. And then on that downbeat, we get into one of the main thematic riffs here. And then that happens again, but with the doubled iteration at the end, which is the first time actually that riff is played that way, that condensed version, the 4-bar version, with the tag at the end, making it a 5-bar version. It's the only time that this happens. And what I mean is this. And then from there, the tune opens up, well, it goes back to the verses, the pre-chorus, and the chorus all the way through. All the stuff that we've learned, every single part that we've talked about. I said it would come back, and it does. And it comes all the way up to the last master, and it goes into what we're going to look at, an outro section we're going to look at. But before we do that, let's talk about that secondary part Now, as that happens, the 3rd and 4th time, a secondary part, the other guy, Kirk, plays something a little different. Same E's, same gallop when it comes around to ascend the open E minor scale. The only difference is, instead of playing the open melody right there, he does this. That. So it puts him a 3rd above that 4 note per string sequence there in a D string that James will be playing, and does this. So while one guitar is resolving on that C root, this one is resolving on an E here. The 3rd of that. First finger, same vibrato. Now, along with the gallop that the primary guitar is playing, that part, the secondary part is doing this. This guy. It's all here on the 3rd string. Again, a 3rd above. But you catch that tag there to line up, go in unison with the primary part again to lead you into... Every time that open E chug is happening during this riff part, both guitars are playing it. So the only difference here at the third time is that part. The fourth time, and remember the primary part is a little bit of a different thing here at the fourth time, but the fourth time, the secondary part is going to do the same thing. But instead of going to that E, it's going to be this. It's going to meet up with the power chord the primary part plays. This time they're both going to play. They're both going to play the same thing for the gallop to get to the open E power chord. But then the secondary part, instead of, is going to do this. It's going to come here to the fourth position and catch that melody, which is actually a fifth above this. But it's here. When it walks into that. There's a lot of stuff going on here, so try to take this slow. What I'm explaining here, watch this again, and pick up the parts, take notes, whatever it's got to be. It's worth it when you play with a second guitar player. And this is a very cool example of the genius of Metallica's riff writing when it comes to two-part guitar harmonies. It's a lot of times it's not just cut and dry. Hey, here's a part, here's 1/3 above. Kind of like the two-part guitar harmony in the interlude with the arpeggios following the 5-bar changes. A lot of times they do this, that there's momentary parts where a riff will leave and go to a harmony and then come back, and it'll also be different intervals. Second time around it'll be the same riff but with a fifth harmony instead of a fourth or a third. It's great. They really took that to the next level on Injustice for All, I think. But this is definitely some hints to what was to come. Okay, so that's that part, and we know, like I just said, it goes into that thematic part, that main riff. What I just showed you, and it does that tag at the end and brings you back into verse, pre-chorus, chorus, all the way through to where we're going next, this outro part where we get some very cool delay stuff played over riffs that we already know. So let's go check that out. Master of Puppets concludes with a run on the E minor part of the verse riff, this guy. That's going to get played 4 times up until the laugh. The band, everybody drops out, the laugh comes in, and you got... And while that's ringing out, there's more laughs, more sinister laughing, and also these very cool delay lines that we're going to check out in a second. But let's just go over some things here. When that riff comes back in at the end, it starts off with... Every time that riff comes in at the beginning, except for the first time in the beginning of the song, it starts with an opening power chord. In the beginning of the song, it comes in just straight up. But when you start the second verse, and when you start the third verse, and when you start this section, it starts with... It just has that momentary E power chord as the first eighth note instead of a muted E. That's the only difference. And then everything happens that I just said happens. And that's how the tune ends. But we're not out of here yet. We got to check out those delay lines because there's a really cool idea that comes in there that's never been done throughout the whole tune. And it's one reason why these lines stick out the way that they do, besides the fact they have some delay on them. So let's solve that mystery. Before we close things out on Master of Puppets, there's one more thing we got to check out, and that is the backwards guitar part that's played over the outro section that we just talked about. So we know that the verse riff, the E minor part of it, is played, and over that is a very cool backwards guitar overdub that sounds like this. So I'm playing the notes that you hear on the record. Nailing the groove is next to impossible because, like I said, this is a backwards guitar part. So there was a part that was recorded with some delay, it sounds like, but then it was flipped. Well, we can recreate that sound like I just did, doing what I did, and that is using a reverse delay in a setting called a dry kill, where the dry signal, or the primary signal, is cut out, and all you hear is the delayed feedbacks with the reverse effect applied to them. So That's what I was doing here. What I was playing is what they played, and what that is a minor flavor we haven't heard throughout the tune yet. We've talked about Phrygian and Locrian riff ideas and chord progressions that throw in natural minor, and there's been natural minor riffs and harmonic minor inflections and stuff like that. This is a Dorian riff. The only difference between Dorian and all the modes that I just talked about is the 6th degree. Well, one of the differences, and the key difference is the 6th degree. This 6th degree is natural. It gives the minor, it gives Dorian a brighter, more pleasant sound, and I think that makes this stick out even more, besides the fact that it's a backwards guitar track. So what I played in the beginning is something you don't really hear in the mix. You know this? You know those two slides? One was a whole step slide, the other one was a perfect fourth coming up, a perfect fourth actually. You do start to hear it at this point. Now, what I'm doing is I'm sliding up this perfect fourth and I'm fingering on the 3rd and 2nd string, and I'm bringing that up 4 frets. And the lower note is what you start to hear come through the mix, and you hear this. You hear that perfect 5th in between the lower note of that interval, that dyad I played in, and the single note that follows it, which is F sharp to C sharp, that's a 5th. And then from there you start hearing all that stuff. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I've heard this tune for a long time now. Geez, too long, more than I want to admit. And you know, this melody, this part is ingrained in my head just as much as anything else. So there's these key little melodic, you know, instances or motifs that are there, such as the one I just showed you, and even this. You know, that little piece, it's just a G major arpeggio. And the thing is, along with the effect, what I'm trying to do is make the notes ring out as long as possible. Now, we don't know what the original track sounded like. We never will, unless, you know, some sort of thing drops on YouTube and, you know, gives us the original recording of it. But I can tell you this, try to make the notes ring out as long as you can. You know, hold them for as long as you can. Because when you don't, you get an effect that you know, it's different than what it sounds like. And actually, at the end, after the sliding power chords and then all the big laughter comes in and the fade out starts, at the very end, you got this. That's how you get that certain thing that happens at the fade out. The fade out's always where the coolest stuff is. I'm just playing this 12, 14, 15 on the B string, and then 14 on the 3rd string. And the last 2 notes, I'm just playing a staccato. And that's what you hear at the fade out. Oh, let's try it again. We're letting these first 3 notes ring. And that's what goes. And actually, I can increase my feedback a little more to get that last bit to come jumping out, you know, a little bit louder, and I would totally nail it. But you can finger these little pieces here however you like. The important part is, however you do it, make sure that they ring for the longest duration. There's really nothing tricky here and stuff. It's all about your tweaking abilities and with your delay and stuff. Oh, and about that, however you do this, whether it's on a modeling device such as the Axe Effects or whatever that you might be using, or pedals, put your delay after the gain. Whether the gain's coming from your amp head, that means it'll have to be in the or your amp, it would have to be in the effects loop. If it's just pedals, it would have to be after your distortion pedal. It'll just get a certain sound as opposed to, you know, a sound you might not want if you put the delay before the gain related device. And that goes for all of the stuff I talked about here when it comes to delay or reverb or anything like that. Everything was post gain. Okay? And there you go. That's Master of Puppets. That is this iconic, legendary, pioneering, completely important, historically significant thrash metal classic. My advice to you is, of course, learn this, but immediately get someone else to play the other parts with you. But even more importantly, get a bass player, get a drummer, get a place to play, turn this up, and play this. It's what people have been doing since 1987 or so, and they should do it for the rest of time, because that's the way life should be. Everybody plays the electric guitar loudly, has to play Master of Puppets 1,000 times in their life. So I'm glad that I could start you on this journey. I know I've been having fun on it myself. See you on the next one.